Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a massive winter storm that'll be impacting the Northeast over the next few days. We'll also be discussing the potential for severe weather both today and tomorrow across the United States. I'll give you the latest breakdown on both of these storms and more in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today, beginning with the northern plains, which is actually where a massive low pressure system is currently located. This has been bringing snow to areas in the northern plains, even blizzard-like conditions over the last 24 hours. This will continue to move off to the east over the next few days, eventually going towards the northeast where we could see a nor'easter. I'll have more on that here in just a moment. Back down to the south is where we're also watching the threat for severe weather tonight into tomorrow. This will start in the southern plains tonight, primarily in Oklahoma and Arkansas, and it'll move its way through areas into the southeast United States as we head into tomorrow. Now, let me take you through the next few days in a broad sense of things to give you an idea of where these storms will actually be. Beginning with tonight, this is where we have our winter storm ongoing. There are blizzard warnings ongoing in the entire state of North Dakota because of all the snow that's falling and as well as the wind gusts that will be behind it. It'll cause some pretty big issues. I'll have more on that here later in this forecast. Going into tomorrow, there'll be severe weather in areas again like Oklahoma and Arkansas tonight. More details on that here in a second. Back down to the southeast, those where we'll see severe weather start to ramp up. Damaging winds, large hail, a couple of tornadoes not out of the question. Once we go throughout Sunday into Monday, we'll be watching for the threat of a winter storm to develop over areas in New England. This is where we might see a nor'easter break out, and this very well could dump some really hefty snowfall totals. We could see upwards of over a foot of snow in a few areas. Once we go through Tuesday into Wednesday, we'll still see some snow ongoing before that low pressure system moves out to the north and east. And then eventually going into late this week, we'll be watching for another large storm that could bring a mix of winter weather along with the threat again for severe weather. This could be a very hefty system as well. I'll have more details on this as we get closer. Now, in terms of the severe weather for today, there is a slight risk for severe weather. That does include areas like Oklahoma and Arkansas. The biggest concern for this will be large to very large hail. You can see that black hatched area. This is representing your potential for 2-inch diameter hail or greater. It's a 10% probability within a 25-mile radius, but you should definitely be mindful of that, especially if you are in that hatched area for this evening. Now, before I show you the severe weather timing, I do want to show you the setup, mainly because it is very interesting. So beginning with the moisture here across the southern plains, dew points will skyrocket this afternoon into the 60s, especially located in areas like North Texas back through southern Oklahoma. But eventually into this evening, into the overnight hours, dew points get as high as 70 degrees in the DFW Metroplex. And you might be thinking there could be pretty significant severe weather there, right? Well, look at the significant tornado parameter for tonight. Again, you can see values upwards of 5. That is extremely high. We are talking like PDS type tornado stuff when it comes to values this high. But once we go to the instability, you're still thinking, holy cow, this is high values. We're upwards of 2,000 to 3,000 joules per kilogram in the Metroplex for tonight for instability. Again, very high numbers. But once we go to the cap, there will be a very strong cap in place tonight, especially across the DFW Metroplex, which should prevent everything that I just mentioned, which is really great news. I mean, when we look at the cap is basically a temperature inversion once we go a bit higher into the atmosphere. So what I mean by that is once we go like higher up, like 1,000 feet up, for example, that is typically going to be a decrease in the temperature. But once we get to like 3,000 to 4,000 feet, there might be a little increase in the temperatures. That prevents clouds from building up, which prevents supercell thunderstorms in a lot of instances. And in this case, we're going to have a very strong cap in place, values below 200 joules per kilogram in the negatives, which does mean, again, a pretty strong cap in place for tonight, which should prevent severe weather. It will not be a 0 chance, but it is a very low chance because of that. Now, in terms of the severe weather for tonight across southeast Oklahoma, we'll see a couple of storms form, most likely just southeast of McAllister after sunset. This is where we could see some large hail and damaging winds. Once we go into Arkansas, this is where I have a bit more concerns for severe weather. Storms will fire up about 8 to 9 o'clock most likely. These will again be most capable capable of large hail. Once we get closer to 11 to 12 o'clock tonight, we'll still be watching for storms south of Little Rock, and eventually going into the overnight hours into tomorrow morning, that line of storms moves down to the south and east. Now, I might go live for this event on my YouTube channel, so make sure to subscribe down below and click the bell icon so you get notified if I go live tonight. Now, in terms of tomorrow's event, it does shift further down to the south and east. We're really watching for areas in Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, as well as along the Gulf Coast near Florida. Main threat again will be large hail. Again, there will be a hatched area for a second day in a row. This is where we could see some hail over the size of hen eggs, which is again 2 inches in diameter. So we might even get upwards of, again, potentially tennis ball sized hail in this region. So keep that in mind. Make sure you protect your car. It's a low chance. It's not zero, but again, just take the proper precautions tonight so you're prepared for tomorrow. Now, in addition to the large hail threat, there is going to be a bit of an increased tornado threat in comparison to today. There is a 5% probability area that is going to include areas like southern Georgia, as well as southern Alabama through the Gulf Coast near Pensacola, Florida. This is where we might see a couple of tornadoes across this very large area. So just make sure you have a way to receive alerts tomorrow in case you have any outdoor plans. Now, once we go through timing for tonight, there will not be a whole lot of storm activity unless you're in northern Mississippi. Tomorrow morning is when that line of storms will start falling apart, producing some gusty winds through Birmingham and Tuscaloosa. This is where we might again see some gusty winds or even potentially damaging winds up to 60 miles per hour. Going through tomorrow morning into the afternoon hours, storms will march down to the south and east. This is where again we could see that large hail threat increase again with some higher lapse rates that can typically help to largen the hail cores that we see with these storms. And once we go through the mid to late afternoon hours, those storms will move through areas like Mobile, Alabama, back through Pensacola, and by the evening hours, those storms will start to get pretty close to moving off coast unless you're in areas like the panhandle of Florida. Now, in terms of areas like Georgia and South Carolina, storms again will really start to ramp up most likely around lunchtime tomorrow, and then by the afternoon and evening hours, we'll be watching for some storm activity, potentially even a few discrete supercells that might form down in southern Georgia. This is where we could see a slightly higher hail and damaging wind threat, and potentially a slightly higher tornado threat as well. Once we go closer to sunset and into the evening hours, that line will start to push through southern Georgia in that slight risk still, and eventually by about 9 to 10 o'clock, storms will start to move into northern Florida, where some damaging winds may still be possible. Now, let's talk about the winter storm that is going to march across the United States over the next few days. I'm going to try to do this as fast as possible because this forecast has already been 7 minutes. But let's begin with those blizzard warnings. They are ongoing in all of North Dakota, as well as through portions of Minnesota. Winter weather advisories also ongoing near the Twin Cities, and then also winter storm warnings in effect for northern portions of Minnesota. Now, once we go through tonight into tomorrow, snow will still be ongoing. It's really going to wind down, though, over the next 24 hours across the northern plains, but there will be blizzard-like conditions through tomorrow due to the high wind gusts that we're going to see. In fact, wind gusts today are already upwards of 30 to 40 miles per hour. Once we go into tomorrow morning, wind gusts still upwards of 30 to 40 miles per hour. This will create blowing snow, which will cause some pretty big travel impacts. So take it slow on the roadways if you must travel. Obviously, traveling is not recommended in blizzard warnings, which is ongoing across the entire state of North Dakota. In terms of snowfall accumulation for the rest of today, most of that snow will fall in areas like Minnesota and Wisconsin. A little bit still back over in North Dakota, but that will start to be winding down here over the next little while. Now, back through the Midwest, we'll be watching for some snow accumulation going into tonight and tomorrow morning. Light to maybe moderate snow will be ongoing, and the heaviest of it will be back down in Indiana as well as Illinois. By tomorrow morning, still some light snow ongoing, maybe a little bit of moderate snow, but a lot of this will not be that impressive. It'll be very isolated to scattered, so we will not be seeing a ton of snow out of this, but keep that in mind. Again, there will be at least some snow ongoing, but the accumulation will start to wind down pretty quickly. In terms of snow accumulation back through the Midwest, some areas like northern Wisconsin could get upwards of 4 to 8 inches. Meanwhile, areas like Chicago and through Indiana and Illinois, you'll be lucky to get around a coating to maybe 2 inches of snow. And finally, the Northeast. This has been a big discussion point over the last several days due to the fact this is where we could see a pretty big winter storm unfold, potentially a nor'easter. This will really start to begin going into late Monday into Tuesday. That is when a low pressure system will center itself just off the coast of areas like Virginia as well as North Carolina. That low pressure system will really start to intensify potentially rapidly. Could see maybe a bomb cyclone type sort of thing happen here down over in areas like southern New England, but we'll be talking about some moderate to heavy snow across a large chunk of New England as we go into Tuesday morning. This again could lead to the potential for several inches of snow, maybe even feet of snow in some areas. Once we go into early Wednesday, that is when that low pressure system will start to move off to the east. Snow will start to wind down a bit more during Wednesday. So this will really be more of a late Monday through early Wednesday event. Tuesday will really be the big day for snow accumulation. And here's the current snowfall accumulation estimate from the European model. Again, things will change as we get closer. I'll have a more detailed forecast on this and much more in our next forecast. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.